So, friends, a very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Dinesh Suna. I am the coordinator of the Ecumenical Water Network of the World Council of Churches. And I'm very happy to welcome you all, those who are present in the room and those who are joining online. And I'm sure my colleagues have already tested the sound check and it is audible, I believe. If not, please let us know. Well, friends, I take this opportunity once again to welcome everyone to this very special gathering that for the first time in this new building of the World Council of Churches, we have Professor Pedro Arroyo, the UN Special Rapporteur, is here with us. But I would ask my colleagues from the senior leadership group of the World Council of Churches, in the absence of the Secretary General who is traveling, both Marianne Esderston, the Director of Communications, followed by Doug Shiel, Director of the General Secretariat of the World Council of Churches, to kindly welcome Pedro and all other panelists as well as online participants. So over to Doug to start with.
Thank you, Dinesh. It's also an honor to welcome all the participants to this encounter and to specifically say a warm word of welcome, bienvenido, to Professor Pedro Arroyo. It is a pleasure to welcome you here on behalf of our General Secretary, Reverend Professor Dr. Jerry Pillay. General Secretary is visiting our member churches in South Korea and also celebrating the centenary of the National Council of Churches in Korea. And today he's meeting with the Prime Minister of South Korea. For the World Council of Churches, water is a precious gift, not only for life, but of faith. Water is a fundamental resource for all life on our blue planet and is an essential sacramental element of our baptism into the life of the church. Be rest assured, Professor, that the WCC is committed to water for all, to water for life, and we will continue to support you in your mandate as Special Rapporteur on the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation. We're grateful for your leadership. Thank you.
I would also like to add my voice as a colleague in the senior leadership team that it's a warm welcome, Professor Pedro Arroyo Agudo. It's a big honor to welcome you as the UN Special Rapporteur for Human Rights to Water and as the first UN representative to visit our new ecumenical center. We have only been here for around 2 months, and you are, in fact, the first UN representative to be with us and also to deliver important message at the time of the Human Rights Council. And as you know, that WCC has a long history in working on UN matters since the very first beginning, involved also in preparing the Human Rights Declaration in close collaboration. Also, one reason that the WCC are located in the City of Peace, in the City of Reformation and Geneva as a headquarters. For the last 20 years, the WCC Ecumenical Water Network has facilitated and shared information and resources to the Fellowship of Churches. We are representing 352 member churches in 120 countries and representing 600 million Christians. And we are also a leading faith actor contributing towards achievement of Sustainable Development Goal number 6, ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. And I would like to quote Amos 5:24. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. So welcome to you, Professor, and all of those in this room and following online. And I hope it will be an important occasion for justice and for water for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Doug and Marianne, for extending those words of greetings and a little bit of our background of the Water Justice Ministry of the World Council of Churches. And the leadership of the WCC is very much invested in the water justice work. Those of you are new to the World Council of Churches and its works. We work on almost all the 17 SDGs and beyond, and much before even the SDGs or the MDGs were even conceived. And therefore, we work on several other issues other than water justice, but the fact that we have given the priority to water justice issues as well, it's a testament of political will of the leadership. So we are very also happy with the WCC and its partners. So friends, I would now take this moment to introduce the program a little bit, and later on I would invite the panelists also to come forward to respond. But as of now, we'll continue in this mode. Marianne has already mentioned about the WCC's work on the SDG 6. And just also to let you know that when only in 2010, water was recognized by the UN as a human right, but in 2006, at the highest governing body of the World Council of Churches, at the assembly that was held in Brazil, Porto Alegre, the assembly issued a statement called Water for Life, and that became the foundation of the formation of Ecumenical Water Network. And we continue to believe then and now, water is a gift of God, it's a public good, and a fundamental human right. But despite the collective, the recognition by the UN, despite our collective work as civil society, as we all know, that about 1/3 of world's population still do not have access to safely managed drinking water, and about half of world's population not having access to dignified sanitation. And Pedro, also, you know about our position that despite all these staggering numbers, we believe that scarcity of water is not the only region, but then it is because of unequal distribution of this precious resource called water, we have these problems. And therefore, our commitment to solve the global water crisis is through the lens of justice and through the lens of human rights. And that is why we work so closely with your mandate at the UN Human Rights Council, Pedro. And to promote that, we do have several activities throughout the year and campaigns. And because World Council of Churches, as Marianne said, is a fellowship of 350 churches, about 500 million members around the world, we try to address these constituencies through our campaigns called 7 Weeks for Water. These are biblical and theological reflections on water, because that is an entry point for many churches to talk about the water crisis. And since 2008, we have published more than 100 Bible studies on water justice issues. And thanks to our communications, we have in one page, this 100+ Bible studies on water justice is available, which is appealing to the Christian populations around the world who are a major religious group. And we continue to work and engage with your mandate. We continue to also work, my colleagues are here from the Human Rights Focal Point staff are here. They engage with the Universal Periodic Review processes. We engage with the UN Water and many others where you are a collaborator. We also continue to engage with the World Water Forum and World Water Week. But since there has been a lot of domination of corporate interest in these platforms, we have also started to join hands with People's Water Forum. And I'm very happy to see my colleague Marcela Oliveira from Bolivia is also joining here, who would then later on talk to us about this. And finally, one appeal to colleagues to sign up for our newsletter, Together for Water, which we publish periodically and every 2 to 3 months. Then you would get to know more information. And one last aspect I wanted to also draw our attention to is this year we have this triple COP, which my colleague Athena would talk about a bit later, but not only the climate COP, but the biodiversity COP and the UNCCD COP, combating desertification COP. That's in all these, WCC is going to be present, and we would further make a publication sometimes next month or in November, probably, a Living Planet Monitoring publication where we try to assess the land, water, and food related issues in different countries and what the churches are doing to respond to those crises. So these are some introductory remarks on the what we do at the WCC on the Ecumenical Water Network and its related programs on land, water, food, and climate justice. Friends, we have here our colleagues, panelists, fellow panelists are here. I would like to, at the moment, acknowledge their presence. And at a later time, I would introduce them more in detail. Besides the senior leadership, we have Athena Peralta, the director for the Living Planet, or the new Commission on Climate Justice. Athena, later on, we will introduce you more. We have in the room Dr. Ingrid Jacobsen from Bread for the World, Germany, but she's also the convener of the newly formed working group on land, water, and food. So we look forward to hearing from you and welcome both of you. Then we have online joining Maud Barlow. That name is not new to us at the WCC. Maud Barlow came to Geneva in 2016 to declare us a blue community. And she has been an inspiring force to turn the world blue. And she would talk about all her new initiative in the what she is engaged now. And she's joining us from Toronto, Montreal, I don't know where, from Canada.
From Ottawa, in the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people.
Thank you, and a very good morning to you. And then we have Marcela Oliveira, the director of the Blue Planet Project, joining us from Bolivia. And Marcela, we will see you soon and maybe introduce you more. And we welcome all other participants joining us from across the world. We would spare enough time to you all for a question and answer session where the audience can also participate online as well as in person. So friends, without further ado, now I would request Pedro Arroyo, our special rapporteur, to please, in a summary, introduce the report that you presented to the 57th session of the Human Rights Council here in Geneva. On the 16th September, you presented that report, and you have been talking about it on 17th, on 18th, on 19th, and today on 20th in 4 different side events. The theme around water and economy nexus, managing water for productive uses from a human rights perspective, where you emphasized water as commons. So you have to unpack that a bit, what is the emphasis of your report. And we also heard that the UN Water Conference is coming up in 2 years, in 2026. So tell us a bit more what civil society can expect and look forward to from. And let us also talk about the new envoy appointed for water collaboration as an outcome of the last UN Water Conference in New York. So about 12 to 15 minutes, I would ask you to please speak now.
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me, but thank you for all your support every day. Well, just to explain you why I have decided to make this report. Several years ago, I realized that we talk very often on the need to develop a human rights-based approach to management, to water management. And I realized that this term is not well understood. It's difficult to understand. I remember in Mexico, someone, an MP that was not in favor of the human right, in a moment, they told me, oh, Pedro, well, tell us how much water you need for the human right. 5%, 6%. And let us to be with the rest of water to do as we want. And I said, no. When we talk about a human rights-based approach, we don't talk about how much water we need for human rights. It's similar as if I talk about a sustainable approach to water management. I don't want to talk about ecology or, specifically. I want to talk about agriculture, industry, cities, everything under a sustainable approach. So it's an horizontal approach. So when we talk about human rights, we want to talk about the different uses of water under a human right-based approach in agriculture, in industry, and so on. So we decided perhaps to go every year on specific fronts on the uses of water, the main uses of water, for explaining as good as possible what it means to make this, but under a human right-based approach. So in this case, it was the economy in general. And the second one will be some days in 1 month. I will present to the General Assembly the nexus water and agriculture and food. Okay, next year it will be water and energy under a human right-based approach. Okay, so when we talk about water and economics, I usually recommend reflecting, as I said in the plenarium in the council, reflecting on the phrase of the Spanish poet Antonio Machado, when he said, "Todos los necios confunden valor y precio. All fools confuse value." And as well to reflect on the distinction made by Aristotle between the concept of economics and that of chrematistics. When I talk to my colleagues, even in economics, and I ask them, I say, "Oh, it's synonymous, no? It's the same, no?" No. Aristotle says very, very different, big difference. They say economics is the art of administrating household goods, while chrematistics manage the goods that are bought and sold on the market. Well, if we reflect, I say, on the values at stake in water management, we will see that the most important ones are not exchangeable for money. As I said in the plenary, as an example, I said, what excellencies is it? What value would you assign in euros, in dollars, other monies, to the water you need to safeguard the health of your families? How much is? How many dollars? Or how to compare, even to compare the value of water needed for public health with the water needed for buying avocados for export. It's legitimate, but it's even not possible to compare. We are on different ethical levels. So we need to make rules, laws that recover this ethical approach. And I propose, and I have no time now for developing from a long time ago, to differentiate, to have difference between the water for life, basically related to human rights, the water for functions and activities consider really of the general interest of society, and in the third level, okay, the third level, water for economics, for being richer, legitimately. And even I talk sometimes in a provocative way, the agua crimen, water crime or crime water, I don't know how to say, no? In activities that could be very profitable, but break the health of the people or the sustainability of ecosystems must be forbidden at all costs. Well, if we are able to do this, it's basic issue. Well, I think that different users, water has multiple users. But of course, the economic projection of the activities that we do with water build a very, very strong, powerful interest. But what I insist is, first and foremost, water sustains life on this planet. And is the key to the territorial stability of peoples everywhere. While asked to social cohesion and coexistence in human societies. So it is therefore vital to manage water, aquatic ecosystems, and even the water cycle fairly and sustainably as common goods and natural heritage. Recognizing water and aquatic ecosystems as commons implies involving the people, involving communities concerned in their management, not just in rights, but also in responsibilities. It's a key issue. However, given the complexity of the values to be managed in today's society, such as, I don't know, for example, ensuring the sustainability of large basins, well, it is essential that states take responsibility and assume the public domain over water and aquatic ecosystem, but, and I insist, but, remembering that this is a matter of managing common goods, which requires non-profit governance and nested governance at various levels, governance at local level, basin level, even at transboundary level when we have shared ecosystems, okay? Governance that ensure transparency, public participation, and accountability, while respecting the rights and responsibilities of the respective communities. Probably I used to say based on the application of the principle of subsidiarity. So in this sense, I underline, it is not enough to guarantee public domain over water. We need to make this kind of public participation and so on. In this sense, I used to make this example. I love the slogan used by the Italian social movement in the referendum for the legal recognition of the human rights in Italy to water and sanitation. They said, it is written water, but it reads democracy. Nice. Well, just at the end, just to say something. At the end of the 2023 conference in New York, the president of the General Assembly recognized the water cycle, global water cycle, as a global common good. I was a little bit surprised and thinking of this. At the end, they say, okay, I agree, but it's not enough. If we talk just on this, we're talking about something that is in the sky, nothing to do here, because we have no institution for representing the whole community. It is not, we have not an efficient way to, but it's okay, recognized as a concept, but it is not enough. We need to go to the territories and to realize that the ecosystems must be managed together with the people in the real situation of the territories. And when we talk on the water, each community, each society is able to take and to have available, must be considered common good, accessible to all, but not appropriable by anyone. We need also this, and to make full participation and responsibility of the people. Because if we talk just in the sky, the global cycle and so on, and nothing more, the market will be ready for responding to how to manage everything. So it's very important to insist on this. I suppose there will be, it's not evident, but I think the debate is opened, and I hope this report will be the base for many debates in which I am ready for participate and collaborate. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Pedro, may I also ask you to say a few words about the upcoming UN Water Conference vis-a-vis the past one and the envoy?
Yeah, to the 2026, I think something, well, the fact that we had the 2023 conference for me was itself very good, very interesting. Not enough, but very, very interesting. After half a century without United Nations in this front, is very important. Well, it is not enough, first of all, because if just one point and the future will be like the past, nothing is, we have no progress. So we need to institutionalize this international meeting, no, under the responsibility of the United Nations and not the private sector. I am not against the private sector, but just I say, imagine that we have no WHO and that we have the COVID and so on, so are convened by the pharmaceutical companies to discuss the health in the world. Well, if there is nothing more, perhaps we have to go there. But it's not the right way to do with this, no? So in this sense, we have the first step to have the first conference. Now we need, and I am talking with the governments, most of them, I am talking with Germany today, Brazil yesterday, Spain, France, they say, prepare a strategy for making an agreement international in the General Assembly for institutionalizing every 3 years. I don't know, no? First question. So in 2026, we have another. My goal will be, I know it was frustrating, the first one, for many people who came, because the United Nations was not ready for receiving the people and hearing, understanding, what do you want? What are you proposing? And then the state can do as they want. They are not prepared. So I remember when we went to the plenaries, there were 40 seats. Even the people couldn't even go into the room for a system for being there. They were outside. So when I talk about this, and they say, well, in 2026, we are on time for changing this and for having, in a moment, spaces in which is the opposite that is normal, as usual. People are invited to participate, to talk, to propose, and states listen. Listen, and then they do as they want. And the other question, local actors, municipalities, community institutions in rural areas, they were not there. Even when they tried to register, it was not possible. And when I went, Paris asked for a register, Berlin. And when I asked, why? They are rejected. Oh no, because it was not an ideological issue. It was just a bureaucratic question. They were not prepared. And so they thought, no, they are public institutions and the states are already here. But I said, well, but imagine the mayor will not call the president and say, President, I want to go to New York. That doesn't make sense. So this can be changed. When I talk with the country, they say, oh, yes, we have to change. And the other question is not so evident. When you go to rural areas, you know perfectly. Acueductos comunitarios de Argentina has 100,000 people, impoverished people who manage themselves. There is no state there. So they must be invited also and listen. So for me, these elements, and to be able to introduce something that we didn't get in the past conference, that was to the conference assume a human rights-based approach. So these goals, I think we can work on this with states that can understand this and make kind of alliance. And I'm talking with different, in December, I will have, perhaps you will be invited, I propose to invite you with 20 states, something that it could be friends for these ideas, and with the movements. And in this last thing, I think it was very positive. Very positive. Thank you for you, because you have been very active in this question. The manifesto for water justice, for the first time, the most active movement in now organized in People's Water Forum, but also the NGOs that are more professional, more institutionalized and so on, but they are in the same task and so on, came together, discussed what to say to the UN. It was very positive. And at the end, even indigenous peoples, because indigenous peoples don't trust no one who is not indigenous. So, but do you remember, when everyone was in the room, suddenly the chiefs arrived and say, we agree. I cried because there was 3 months talking with them. And like, wow. So take this point to go ahead and go to 2026 with a strategy.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pedro. I think this is what Pedro's heart lies with the people's movement, with the water defenders, civil society. And that also sometimes brings the wrath of the other powers that are around the water issues, the corporates and so on. But thank you so much. And friends, I thought it is Pedro in his second term doesn't need much introduction, but I think it's protocol to briefly also talk about him. Pedro Arroyo is in his second term of his mandate as the Special Rapporteur on Right to Water and Sanitation. He comes from Spain, has been a parliamentarian in the Spanish government, a professor in economics, has contributed more than 70 articles in 70 books, and a very renowned activist who we are so glad. I think of all the special rapporteurs in the past, you have won the hearts of the civil society and people's movement, and we wish you very well for that, Pedro. Now, this is the time we would now listen to some responses with different angles. So I would request my colleagues Doug and Marianne to switch seats with Athena and Ingrid. So also we have the online participants can see us better. So we have about a little less than an hour left so that we listen to some of the fellow panelists. And as Athena comes here, let me introduce to on my right, Dr. Ingrid Jacobson, who is from Bread for the World, Germany, and she is responsible for the work on water justice related work through the Bread for the World, but also Ingrid is engaged on the nexus issues, how water connects with land, water, and food, and climate change. And rightly, Ingrid has been elected as the convener or the chair for a new working group at the WCC that is on land, water, and food justice. She's based in Germany, but we are very happy that you are here able to join us in person. So Ingrid, you're wearing multiple hats, but please share some of your thoughts, maybe in response to Pedro's report, but also in general on the Nexus approach. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you that I have the opportunity to speak here. It's really an honor for me. And it was very nice to listening to people. I know some of your thoughts, but the way you present them is very motivating and giving new ideas. But I will come later to that one. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself again. So I'm working in for Bread for the World. It's a German Protestant church as an advocacy officer for food security, agriculture, water in times of climate change. And as Dinesh said already, I'm also the convener of the working group on land, water, and food, which is part of the Commission on Climate Justice and Sustainable Development of the WCC. Maybe let me shortly introduce that working group. So it's a group, one of 5 working groups of the Commission, which was established in March. There are 8 members at the moment, but we are thinking about extending. The members have a great or a huge diversity concerning age, concerning gender, and also geographic areas where these people are coming from. In this group, we are following a nexus approach, like it's food, water, land is one entity. So we always need a holistic approach. We can't tackle each for its own. This is quite clear. And then we don't look at food and water only, but we look at food systems. So food systems, it's not only production. It's for sure it is production, but it's also harvest, it's value adding, it's marketing, and it's consumption and waste management. So we have to look at the whole picture. Not only its value chain, but also at the different aspects, like it has economic aspects and social aspects. Therefore, we are following ecological approaches who look at all the different aspects. So it's not only technical things, producing food. Yeah, it's for sure we are rights-based concerning food. There's right to food and there's right to water. And this is a basis we are working from. Yeah, also we see water as a common good, as land also can be, not necessarily, but it's always good to look at land also as a common good. It's a bit more complex, so therefore I just want to mention it here, but it is in our approach. And then we are following the VGGT on land tenure fishery. So there are guidelines developed by the Committee of Food Security. There's a civil society mechanism who's involved in developing guidelines. And these ones are the guidelines, voluntary guidelines. They are not binding on tenure, fisheries, and land. Yeah, and so this is the working group. And yeah, me personally, I'm working as an advocacy officer in Bread for the World. So water was always important for Bread for the World, even in 14 years ago, when water was established as a human right. Now we are looking also at water as a human right, especially, yeah, it's very complex. So at the moment, we see that water is also used as a weapon sometimes, or there are so many different aspects, and it's going along with governance also. Water, even it is a common good, but it needs to be governed, but by the right entities. So this is also very complex, but we are really into it. And I got a lot of motivation from your speech now. There was one thing I would like to add also. It's not only access to water, but it's also the quality of water. And if it comes to food, we have the industrial agriculture, which is highly polluting water. Also the mineries, and this I think is another aspect we would like to add. So thank you. And
Thank you.
I give back to Dinesh.
Thank you so much, Ingrid, for laying out our work through the working group that you chair, and also the various work that you do with regards to water from at the Bread for the World, but also on the focus on this normative content of accessibility, quality, but also affordability and availability, etc. All these 5 normative contents, which your mandate works very well, Pedro. So thank you so much. And moving on this conversation, we are going to listen to various perspectives, various angles. And Pedro mentioned about the water as commons. And to further that notion, we have a concept of blue communities. And that is where I would invite Maud Barlow to now come online. And Maud Barlow is, as I said, is not a stranger to us, the founder of the Blue Planet Project, who has been actively working in spreading the concept of blue communities around the world, started in Canada and then now spreading in Switzerland. Now we are the highest number of blue communities. We have 46 plus blue communities, including Welcome Slope churches, including Bern University, Zurich University, Bern, the capital itself. And very soon we are now working on declaring Geneva Airport as a blue community. And that is something, already we are at it, we'll talk more. But now latest, she has started something on blue schools. That is also something interesting, Maud. So, and Maud is equally, I think she has got something like 14 honorary doctorates. I don't know how she is able to, manage all these things. But people recognize your work, Maud, and we are so grateful for your work. Over to you, Maud. I got about 7-8 minutes to share this concept of blue community.
Well, thank you so much, Dinesh, and thank you to the World Council of Churches, all the fabulous work you do. There are no words to tell you how important it is. And Pedro, you are the goddess sent you to us. You are just the very most important advocate for water justice, for the human right to water, for a rights-based approach to water and nature, which I like to think of as being both for nature and for humans. And I just want to thank you so much for your tireless work. You've just been an incredible voice for us. I'll talk about Blue communities in 1 minute, but I do want to set a warning to us. I've just finished the first draft of a white paper for the Global Alliance on the Rights of Nature on the commodification and financialization of nature. And I'm really kind of worried, and I want to sound the alarm here a little bit, and I will be sharing this quite widely when it's ready. But there's been, as you well know, some very good and important emphasis on biodiversity, on the 30 by 30 protection, on what they call nature-based solutions and all of that. But I'm very concerned that a lot of it's been overtaken by private sector interests who realize that there's a lot of money out there, money from countries, money from the UN, money from the World Bank, money from some of the big conservation organizations around saving nature. And to put it bluntly, as one of them said, governments have blown it, so the market's going to take over. And I see this, we're hearing that there's plastics offsets and, about carbon trading, but you may not know that it's also happening for water pollution trading. And it's now even on crypto and Bitcoin on the blockchain where you can share and trade environmental assets. It's really moving quite fast. And I want to sound the alarm because what Pedro is doing here is sounding the alarm in the area of water, but it's happening across the board. So, all right. So this project, Blue Communities, was about stopping one form of privatization and financialization of water. Back in 2009 in my country, I'm Canadian, we had a government that was basically doing to municipalities in Canada what the World Bank was doing to countries of the global south, and saying, if you want financing for your upgrade and your water infrastructure and so on, you have to move to a public-private partnership. We won't give you federal funding, in this case in my country, unless you move to privatization. So we thought, do we always want to be against everything, or do we want to put a vision forward that we think matters, that we want to say who we are and what we do? And so we created the Blue Communities Project, basically starting just with Canada, just with municipalities, but basically saying, say no to privatization. Declare that water is a human right. Declare your support of it as a public trust. And if there's clean, safe tap water coming out of available to you, then you will not provide bottled water. You'll ban that and work against plastics. But in 2012, I had the pleasure of being in Bern and met the then mayor of Bern. Chaput, his last name, was a wonderful man. And he said, he loved it. He said, if we bring you back and we become a Blue community, will you come for the ceremony? So not only did Bern become the first city outside of Canada, but the University of Bern and the Reformed Church in Bern, all in Switzerland, all became Blue communities. And as you say, Dinesh, it's just an incredibly powerful movement, but it is also moving very well in other countries, Germany, and now we're Italy, and it's really taking off. And it was just so moving to see it move to universities, to communities around the world. We have in Canada close to 50 municipalities now that are blue cities, blue towns or cities. And we have in something like 25 million people now live in official Blue community cities around the world, including Paris, Brussels, Berlin, Thessaloniki, Los Angeles. And when we think of the water crisis, the human rights crisis, it isn't just in the global south. When I was in Los Angeles, I was stunned to learn that 1 million people in the greater Los Angeles area did not have access to clean water and sanitation. So we need to understand this is a universal reality. So it was very important that it moved into universities, into the education area. And so my latest my latest project is Blue Community Schools, which we've launched just recently here in Canada through the Council of Canadians. And it is, of course, the first iteration is geared a little more to Canada because that's who we're trying to reach here. But I'm really hoping that people will take the model and move it internationally. Basically, it's to the pledge to become a blue school is that you will educate about the need to protect water, that you'll promote the human right to water, and that you will, again, where clean water is available through the tap, that you will not provide or sell bottled water at school. So a school can be certified with a lovely ceremony. We've already done a couple of them and they're quite wonderful and the kids are wonderful and they get a real kick out of this because it's something joyful and something positive and we all need hope. I call it wise hope. It's not a everything's fine hope, but it's, looking things in the face hope and saying, I'm going to do something anyway. I'm going to put my hand out and touch the universe where I can make a difference. So I invite you to be part of this joyous project, Blue Communities, because it is a positive way to bring a hope and action to future generations. I want every small child, every school, every community in the world to start thinking blue as well as green, and for us to understand and love the sacred nature of water. So thank you for the work that you're doing, Dinesh and Pedro and everybody on this call. And I would be delighted to share more information on all aspects of this.
Thank you, Maud. Listening to you always kind of encourages all of us. And you continue to work. You do not rest, even though you're traveling. International traveling has been reduced a lot, but you continue to write or spread the words. Yeah, keep doing the good work, and we're there to support you. Thank you, Maud. Friends, now I think we would look in to WCC again because Rajendra Singh, unfortunately, he could not join. I'm sure he's not online, and he has another event in Delhi as a keynote address speaker at the Government of India's event on water. So he is not able to join us. He had promised a video, but unfortunately, I think he couldn't make it. So we have now Athena Peralta, the director for the Commission on Climate Justice and Sustainable Development at the WCC. And she is also directing the Living Planet of the WCC, the program within which the Ecumenical Water Network is nested. So Athena, also, I would request you to speak a little bit about the Living Planet, but on this Nexus program that we are thinking on land, water, and food, but also a little bit on our COP engagements, because the interconnections here is, of course, water is connected to all this. So next few minutes for you, Athena, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Dinesh. And I also really want to thank our previous speakers, Professor Pedro, Ingrid, and Maud, for really setting the scene. I think it's the work of people like you who have really been also inspiring the World Council of Churches and its program, which is now called the Living Planet Program, which brings together economic and ecological justice. And as Ingrid has also already shared, the work of the Living Planet is also guided by a commission that the World Council of Churches just recently established, which is the Commission on Climate Justice and Sustainable Development. And there's a range of work that we do in this area, but just to quickly summarize that this involves formation and theological reflection. This involves strengthening and building networks, including of green and blue churches, as we now will want to call them, and hence I'm wearing blue and green today. But also a key part of our work is advocacy. Advocacy at different spaces, and not least the UN Human Rights Council, but also the various UN conferences on climate, on biodiversity, and also on combating desertification. Now, in response to these challenges that we are facing, and these are challenges around, we have a water crisis, we have a climate crisis, we have an economic crisis, we have a biodiversity crisis. So in the face of all of these crises, the World Council of Churches is proposing a new and integrated approach to addressing these key ecological challenges. And this is a approach that brings together land, water, and food justice. And this is really about building also on the work already, the really a powerful work that has already been done by the Ecumenical Water Network, but also by the Food for Life Network of the World Council of Churches. And so this is aimed at really building a holistic approach to these issues, recognizing that land, water, and food are intrinsically interconnected, as many of our speakers have already said. Dinesh and I, we just came back from a consultation in Limuru in Kenya, exploring the theme of land as commons, not commodity. And even when we were there talking about land as commons, we said, how can we talk about land as commons, not commodity, without talking about water as a commons and not a commodity, or food as well as a commons, not a commodity. And so it's these three areas especially that are very, very much interrelated, and it's impossible to deal with land justice issues without also dealing about water justice issues and food justice issues and so on and so forth. And so a key aim of this approach is to really help develop a more comprehensive set of solutions, looking at the system, which is something that Ingrid and a few others have also mentioned, that we need to look at all of these things as a system. And this is also because we are increasingly realizing that the root causes for water injustice are also the same for land injustice, are also the same for food injustice, are also the same for the climate crisis. These related and intersecting ecological and economic crises are very much rooted in a globalized capitalistic economy based also on legacies of colonialism that are reducing these critical things such as water and land are being reduced to a commodity, being reduced to a resource, being reduced as to an investment asset for profit making. And this and it's this approach that has led to increase in land grabbing and increase in water grabbing. And so understanding that the root causes for many of these crises, the water crisis, the land justice, are the same, means that the solutions will also have to take note of these interconnections, and we see that again the solutions, there are common solutions that are already being worked out, including we've had here really excellent input and visioning on water as a human rights. water as human rights, but also why not land as looking at land as a human rights issue, looking at food as a human rights issue. But also looking at all of these elements as having their own rights. So water as having its own inherent dignity and rights, and land as having its own inherent dignity and rights. And this is also something that we as churches are trying to contribute to this kind of theological reflection that we actually we have to appreciate very much as well the indigenous thinking and indigenous worldviews and spiritualities that are actually pinpointing us to this direction of thinking of water, thinking of land almost as a relative, as a kin, you know? And I think this is something that is for faith communities also very much important. And perhaps a final point to say that critical to this approach of this land, water, and food integrated approach, we believe that movement building is going to be central to this, that we need movements also inspired by faith who can drive such a vision of water as a human right, of water as having a sacred value, of land as a human right, and food as a human right, and as having sacred values. So I think I will end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Athena, for articulating beautifully the concept of one is the holistic approach on land, water, and food, but each of these having its own inherent right and dignity, and thereby bringing in that ethical and theological reflections also into it, and this whole speculative industries on valuing land or water for its values in economic terms, that in fact has landed water to be listed in the stock exchange in the future markets some years ago, unfortunately. But thank you for raising these concerns, Athena. And you also said movement building is the key. So that gives us a nice segue to go to our last speaker this afternoon, Marcela Oliveira. Marcela, I hope you are able to hear us. There you go. And Marcela is joining us from Bolivia. And she's the director for the Blue Planet Project and a key integral part of the People's Water Forum, which is that movement building that you mentioned, Athena. And Pedro mentioned about the Water Justice Manifesto, which we practically took the UN plenary to seize, and Marcela was the one who basically read that manifesto from the UN headquarters in Geneva. So Marcela, tell us a little bit more on the People's Water Forum, how it's a tool to further this vision of water as commons, and how do we resist the onslaught on water as common, which is promoting water as a commodity rather. And in the meantime, if anybody wants to have a cup of coffee still here, there is some extra coffees here, please. Yeah, you can also grab one. And oh, thank you, Marianne. So over to you, Marcela. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Dinesh. I really appreciate this time to talk, and also very happy to see some of our friends there, Ingrid, Pedro, of course, and also you, Dinesh. I am gonna say a little bit about what is the People's Water Forum. The People's Water Forum is it's a coalition of coalitions. We have been very well organized, I will say, starting in after 2000 and the water war in Cochabamba, Bolivia, from where I come from. and where I live, people start to get together and said that the only way we can have an impact and that we can fight water privatization is getting together. So we started to create coalitions. I believe the first one was the Red Vida, which is an Inter-American Water Justice Network that goes from Canada to Argentina. Then there was there is the European Water Movement, of course, and then other regional networks. And recently, a couple of years ago, the Africa Water Justice Network also came up. So all these the regional coalitions created this big coalition called the People's Water Forum, and we have been it's not new because we have been, for almost 2 decades, more than the 2 decades now, fighting against water privatization. But it's the last couple of years that we put ourselves that name, and we're working towards water justice. I want to mention a couple of things that caught my attention on the report from Pedro, which is, actually give us a light on many issues that we have been fighting for over these years. First, he gives a really good background of what's going on at the UN level related to water. And I myself, I can speak perhaps a little bit about the Latin Americans. We haven't really follow up what's going on at the UN. And why we haven't done that? It's because we distrust that space. We find it very hard to harvest anything. We find it very arid. And that has been changing on the last couple of years, being Pedro there and amplifying our voices there. So we have been, it gives us a really background of how the UN is starting to talk about water and what's the approach and all of that. And I think that's very important and it's key for the water movement in general. The other thing that I find very uplifting is that Pedro uses terms that we have been using for a while in our movements, like water for life, for example, or dignity. He talks about the common global heritage. He talks about the reproduction of life. Talks about solidarity and things like that. Those are terms that we have been talking in our own movements, in our own regions, but suddenly to hear that on these reports, it's very important because we feel like our voices have been finally heard. But at the same time, in here, I wanna also mention that this language is very important. But at the same time, when we're talking about the water as a common good, as a global commons, the Global Commission on the Economics of Water also talks about water as a common good. So what makes us different from their approach, and what can we take from language? I think it's very important, and the content that we give to those words. So we have to be very careful in this regard, because our language has been co-opted by these organizations that are promoting the commodification of water, and we have to be very careful about that. In the report, that was actually this Global Commission on the Economics of Water, that was also a couple of years ago the past year was presented at the UN Water Conference. For example, they talk about, they don't talk anymore about public-private partnerships. They talk about just water partnerships. So they are starting to use other words and other language that can be very confusing, and then we have to be very careful about that. The other thing that I really liked from the report from Pedro is that he recovers the memory of the water struggles. He talks about Cochabamba. He talks about Uruguay. He talks about the Italian referendum. And I think those are very important moments for the water movement in general that we cannot forget. He also talks about the community management of water, which has been ignored for years. We always have talked about public water or private management of water, but there is a third way to manage water, and that's the community. Those are the community water systems that have been ignored, historically ignored, where they are providing water to millions in Latin America. I live in Cochabamba, and in my town, 60% of the water provision comes from this autonomous water system. Only 40% is provided by the public company. So it is very important that we pay attention to these new ways of managing water, where there are important lessons for related to the democratization, related to transparency, accountability. So I really liked the fact that Pedro has mentioned the community water systems and acknowledge their presence. Pedro also talks about the dangers hidden in the public-private partnerships, the concessions, the extractive industries, and all those models based on maximizing the profits and the financialization of water. I think this is also very important. If our struggles in the water movement have been for many years, I will say almost a decade, trying to get in Maud has been a very important person in that movement, pushing for a UN convention on the right to water. I think the focus today has to be in the implementation of the right to water. How can we do that? I don't think I think what it makes us different from how these different points of view is the way that we are going to achieve that. I think the goals can be the same at many levels, but I think the way that we are going to make the right to water a reality, I think that's what makes different from others. I'm gonna finish with Pedro also starts with a quote from Machado, a Spanish poet. He starts his report with a quote from him, and I want to finish also with a quote from Machado in these very dark times. And Machado says, "There's no night darker than the one that precedes the dawn," and I think. Your report, Pedro, gives us a little bit of light in that darkness. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marcela, for really highlighting a change that we have been seeing in the UN Special Rapporteur on water, his language and the terms and the examples. I think for a long time, we did not see that in your mandate, unfortunately, but this is a welcoming change. But also, Marcela, and you also told us that the economic interests are now repackaging the same old wine in new bottles, basically talking or appropriating our languages when they don't mean that. So even in the Bible, as Nikki would mention, that peace, they say, but they mean no peace. These kind of prophetic mentions in the Bible. But they do not mean all what that they say. So we have to be vigilant and challenge them. And the People's Water Forum, of course, is one entry point which Marcela and we as Ecumenical Water Network are very much engaged. And we continue to challenge these narratives. Friends, we have now come to the end of the presentations, and the time now, the next 15 to 20 minutes are for the audience inside the room and those who are online to please raise your questions or comments on any of the presentations that you have heard. And in the end, our panelists, including Pedro, would be able to respond to it. So all of you are welcome to raise your hands and we will take all the questions in several rounds maybe, and then ask so online or in person around the house. You want to start with? Okay, we have one inside the room, Nadia, but others, please raise your hands so that we can notice if you have a question or comments to make. Go ahead, Nadia, and introduce yourself.
Yes. Morning, good afternoon, good evening to the audience online and to you speakers. I just wanted, in fact, I'm Nadia Barbobin. I work here with a community called the Arconia program and sustainable development in really getting how churches can really move the SDGs agenda and make it an impact at local level. But I happen to have an experience on the SDG 12, which is on the consumption and production, where I see a very clear approach of how we have been able, even before the Agenda 2030, before 2015, because there has been a global movement in 1992 to really change what we call the patterns of consumption and production. And we know that consumption and production is where there is a lot, great amount of water that are used. My question is, when we see how we are addressing this SDG 12 in a systematic way, and how we are able to implement it and to make it a trigger, why? Because government is also a bigger consumer through its procurement, and which represents sometimes from 15 to 45% of the GDP of the country. So therefore, we see development partners very much committed to support countries in the reform of their public procurement policies. And there is a process, and it seems to work. My question is, of course, under those strategy of bringing what we call sustainable public procurement, meaning getting government to buy sustainably and to change the market, seems to work as an approach. So the question is, how can we apply a bit of the same similar process to get development partners, because water is part of a SDG. SDG 12 seems to have maybe a bit more, I would say, experience in implementing impact in countries. Can't we make some kind of similar approach, getting through development partners to make it also a priority, similar as they do for SPP? Why? Because it triggers sometimes a lot of grants and an investment in the country. So my question is, can we find some kind of triggers to get development partners to commit more on this in this area?
Okay, thank you. We will take a few more questions, and then anyone of you wants to respond. I see this, sorry, Gregoire, if you can read the names. I cannot read the names from here.
Yes, tell me. Mihaela and Tofi.
Yes, yes, go ahead. You've been spotlighted. Go ahead and brief question, comment.
Thank you very much.
Introduce yourself.
Okay, it is a real honor to be here with you.
Oh, okay.
It's for the first time attending such a meeting. I am coming from Romania. I'm a professor. I'm working in agriculture and also in biotechnology. So I was really impressed about all the presenters here, all the panelists. And yes, Pedro make some very relevant statements in this area. And because I'm a bit closer to Aristotle, I will say that, yes, considering generation and corruption as a very important book of Aristotle, probably we really need to be closer to the scientific community, as science is really fast moving today. And if we are talking about only land, water and air, probably for the future, probably it will be very, very important, because they will really become poisoning or poisoned also because of our fast moving civilization, and I am not sure how. However, I would love to remind to all of you that water was a very nice subject for Heraclitus, who talk about water as body courses, and trying to make a parallel in between our lives and the courses of this kind of waters. And yes, I would love to be part of this stream, working together with you. And it is really fascinating to hear you and to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Maria, and good to see you again. We met in Nairobi in the land consultation. Thank you. Yes, I think we had somebody had raised the hand physically, number 3. Yes, I can't read, but the one who is raising the hand.
Suzanne Matanis.
No, but there was one other person.
Tenny.
Tenny,
Yes.
yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yes,
Tenny, yes, Tenny. Go ahead, Tenny. I can't see you from here.
Yeah. Thank you very much for everything, which I all I can say is to commend and really wish you better opportunities to continue. But as I have been listening, and as a Middle Easterner now, I want to ask a question to Mr. Arroyo. You mentioned 2026 will be the next meeting on water. Now, you mentioned that it will be in a way a confirmation or a challenges coming from the established way of we have been thinking and working. But my mind goes immediately to the new disasters. For example, let's say the Middle East, what's happening? Or when I look into Africa, all the civil wars and the conflicts and the water problem. So how are we going to at least raise an awareness or some guidelines how those situations are going to be managed? I think that's the best forum to raise that kind of questions as well. Has it been foreseen?
Thank you, Tenny. Professor Tenny is from the Webster University here in Geneva and a former executive committee member of the WCC. Thank you. Susan, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I am speaking from Zambia in Africa. I'm so delighted that I'm able to be a part of this very important discussion. And rightly so, the title of our discussion is Water is Life. And let me speak from a Zambian perspective. We are already experiencing water challenges in my country. And I want to believe that one of the problems that we have is the unprecedented growth of population. So when we all thought that we had oases of water reservoirs, they now stand mansions, houses, and all those big mansions of industry and offices and what have you. Industrialization, in my view, is part of the problem. People were happy living in their huts. People were happy drinking water from their wells. But now we have a problem. And the problem is water. People have to walk long distances. Part of the problem, I'm not giving a lecture, but I'm saying part of the problem I see in my country is that industrialization has created a problem for people to have water as life. I just wanted to, put that as a point from me. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you so much, Susan, for raising this concern. Any more questions, comments from the room or from outside?
If I may, I would just quickly extend Susan's concern to look at the impact on women. Because in many spaces where industrialization has created this problem, and in many communities where water is a scarce commodity, it is women and girls who have to go water fetching, and that has its own impact on education and subsequently on their ability to contribute to the economy. So how do we move forward in those kind of contexts? And I'll stop there because we didn't get answers.
Yes. Thank you, Nikki, for raising the gender concerns also. So friends, now thanks so much for your questions. I now turn to the panelists. What I will do is, instead of asking each one of you to respond, this would be your last round to either respond to some of the questions or your last thoughts. Then we will wrap it up because we are almost running out of time, and I request your indulgence if we can extend by at least 10 more minutes so that we can have the responses coming, because it's just about to be 4 o'clock now here. So we had several questions from Nadia. We had on the sustainable public procurement by the governments, what lessons there to be learned from the water community. Professor Maria was a comment more or less, and Professor Teni raises the concerns on the Middle Eastern crisis. Pedro, you probably would respond to that because you have been talking about it. Susan draw the attention of the industrialization, population growth, etc., and how it's making water accessibility difficult. And Nikki added the gender dimensions of it. So we will go in the same way, maybe. Which side we want to start? Go ahead. Your last comment, and if you want to
My last comment, maybe I start and others add. So what I can say as a general answer, there are technical solutions concerning water for everything. So the gender question, the industrialized, I think it's more about political will. It's about greed. It's about making money. So I think it's not on, it was population growth was mentioned. It can be a challenge, but there are solutions. So it's very much depending on the political will, on how society is organizing itself, what are the priorities, who is gaining from it, and how is it ruled. So only I give one example from my own city, it's Berlin. So all water was privatized because the water infrastructure all was privatized because everybody was thinking it will be cheaper. But it wasn't. The prices went up, and so the city of Berlin bought it back. Had a lot of money buying it back. But since then, it's working very well because the thinking behind is not profit, but service for everybody. And there are more examples than that. So that might be my answer now to.
Okay. Yeah. Pedro, I'll ask you to last comment, please, if that's okay. Athena, maybe you will be the last one.
Yes, thank you so much for some of those questions and reflections. And I think, yeah, thank you, Ingrid, because I think you also highlighted some of the things that I wanted to say. So just as an addition, and maybe in a way, also responding to a bit, not comprehensively to Nadia's question. I think we do need to have these innovative approaches. But I think at the core of such approaches, we really have to ensure that this is about exerting public control over water, exerting community control over water. And I think the problem with some of these approaches that are also being considered, they put too much emphasis on market and private sector, and this is where we have problems arise because of motives of greed and profit making. And also just to add again to what Ingrid said about political will, this is what is needed. But we need political will that is also, I guess, married to moral courage And it's really also about seeing water in a different light, as having as being essential for life, as having some sacred and spiritual value. So to have also the moral vision behind the political will is going to be very important. Final thing, which has to do with Suzanne's comments, and I think we have also not gone so deep in this meeting. We didn't have time, but the issue of water is very, very much tied up to climate change as well. So, Suzanne, you spoke about industrialization and population growth. But climate change is perhaps going to be, especially in the near future, one of the biggest factors that will be negatively impacting people's access to water. And yeah, so.
Yeah, thanks, Fatima, for the very valid points. From the online panelists, Maud, are you still around?
I'm right here. I'll be very quick. I
Go
will
ahead.
speak to the issue of industrialization and the power that big business has, and the decisions that governments, local at every level, often give priority to big companies, to free trade zones, to industrialization. And I would add there, and we can't get into it in great detail here, but the whole concept of virtual water, the water that gets exported in the form of agricultural exports or whatever. So, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, this is a huge issue, and what we need to do is we need to prioritize water access. I helped write the law in Vermont, one of the states in the United States, when they brought in a law to protect their groundwater. And basically, they said their water is for people and people's immediate needs. Secondly, for ecosystem and food production for local people, and only third then for business and export. And this is really a very different way of looking at things. And you say, what are the needs? It very much speaks to what Pedro said, which is you can't compare water that's used to grow avocados to export away. And something like a fifth of all the water all the trade that goes every day, all the water that's displaced, has to do with this virtual water trade. That cannot be compared to the need people have to water for life. I want to remind us, and I know the issue is so often bad governance, no governance, corruption, and so on at all levels in all of our governments. But Martin Luther King said, legislation may not change the heart, but it will restrain the heartless. We have the right to good governance. And the alternative to governance is to give away all of the protections around biodiversity and water and all of those decisions to the market. And it really frightens me how entrenched that thinking is becoming. All the countries have, governments have failed, therefore we have to turn it over to the market. I see a whole new unfolding of this, and I think it's deeply worrying, and I'm hope to get my paper out wide and far, because I don't think a lot of people are I think it's kind of a small group that's watching this process, and not as deep as it needs to be.
Thank you, Maud, and particularly on this whole virtual water export through European and American corporations or countries importing water-intensive crops from countries which are already under water stress. And I think Bread for the World published a study on this, and we will share that study also with the participants. That's a very vital point. Thank you for that. Marcela, any response and last comments?
Yes, coming from a country that is from the south, and where we have this progressive government, I also want to say that it could be very tricky when we're talking about, because now it's not like these private companies coming to extract our water. It's not that clear anymore, because it's a little bit blurry. Because in our case, for example, it's our government saying, oh, we need this industry, we need to do mining here, we need to because those are like what they call strategic industries. If that doesn't, if we don't do mining here or we don't drill here, we will not have enough money in order to survive. So most of these things have come up lately, especially with the governments from the South that are, these progressive governments. So how do we deal with that? How can we respond to those issues? I think this is a very important thing to think about. And again, as Pedro says in the report, we have to find other ways to measure wealth and richness in our countries, right? It's not the GPD anymore. So what is it? And I don't think there's just one single answer to this, but I think we have to, according to where we are, according to our countries, our regions, we have to find the answers. And we have to, we cannot be, this is what the World Bank usually does, gives one recipe for all. And it's not like that. We have to find our own answers to that. And I think it's very important, as Maud pointed out at the beginning, that we do not just oppose, but that we also think on our own solutions, our own alternatives. And that will be different from one place to another, because there are cultural issues, there are social issues, economical issues that are different from one place to another. I think that's very important that we start to think about that. And again, we have the power to do those things. And I can tell you that from firsthand. I come from a country, I come from a town that has opposed water privatization, and we have kicked out this big corporation. And we have kicked out bad governments too. So we have to, I think the first step is get together, start to talk, and find a common ground from where we can push for rejecting these policies, but at the same time creating our own alternatives. And I think Latin America has been very, very important on that point, creating our own alternatives. And we have to start to look at them as places where we want to build and go. Thank you, Dinesh.
Thank you, Marcela. Cochabamba, which anniversary is it, Marcela? Cochabamba struggle, it all began there.
25th next year, 25th.
Next year, 25th. And then Marcela herself was also involved even that time. So thank you for continuing this long. Pedro, your last comments, but also include the Middle Eastern crisis, which you talk so passionately, but also the gender dimension on water, securing water for families.
Well, so many things. So, with respect to Gaza, I think I have no time here, but we had a press conference the day before yesterday, I think, or yesterday, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Tuesday on the day. So, with 4 rapporteurs, and I think I can see.
Yeah, we saw that video already.
The video. So, yeah. Well, just perhaps one information and requirement and one reflection, because and then I go because I have my flight.
Yes.
I'm late. The information is my last report. It was scheduled in 2 years. Would be the last one. Wanted to be. I was thinking on devoting the topic to clarify what does it mean democratic water governance based human rights based under a human rights based approach. Well, it could be some summary, comprehensive of the different reports during these 6 years. But in the last time, having the 2026 conference, I think perhaps I will have this report 1 year before, in order to have time to push it and to present also to the conference. So this, for me, the main report I want to do. I would like to do it with all of you. I want to make a huge, as big as I can, process participation in the way that this report will not be my report, but our report. in a very, very wide sense, including universities, experts, local authorities, and so on. One, community-based people in community institutions, etc. So I will ask to you for this contribution and a reflection, one reflection. With respect to consumption, scarcity, I am not sure if this reflection was done in one of my two reports or last reports. And I'm not sure it was probably in the one of water and food that I gave the report to the General Assembly in 1 month in New York. In any case, the reflection is, I think we need to, when we talk about scarcity, we make scarce the planet and so on. I think we are already in the challenge to understand that we are at the beginning of the post-growth era. We need to change the concept of progress we have at present. And I think I made this reflection when we talk about scarcity in food, water, and so on. And my reflection a little bit is, well, it's not mine, I think it's a shared reflection, is that we have a very nice home in this planet. From my point of view, the roof is human rights, the basic one. For this, there is no scarcity. We cannot have scarcity with this. The roof, the roof, not the roof, the ceiling, the floor. The floor, excuse me. The floor is human rights. And the ceiling or the roof is sustainability. So in the middle, we have a wide space for building this new concept of progress. A wide space. But respecting that this is the house and not another one. We are in this planet, not in another. This is our house. So it's an optimistic way, but we need to change deeply the way of thinking. And the concept of progress we have, the governments, the people even see, individually even. So for me, this is big. And I suggest to you, I advise to pay attention to the next report of the rapporteur on extreme poverty, Olivier de Schutter, because on this topic, post-growth era.
Poverty.
I think it will be very important. So I go.
Yeah. No, we are finishing. So thank you so much, Pedro. Thanks to all the panelists. Let's give a big hands to all our panelists, all the participants, and just to leave you with some of the key points that everyone has mentioned. Pedro's 2025 report is to the Human Rights Approach report should be looking forward to that. The UN Conference 2026 is obviously, that's also probably your last year of the mandate.
Yep.
So we probably also need to look at a similar guy or a woman replacing Pedro. Otherwise, all the good work done is wasted. That also is another one. Valuing water not only in economic term is what Pedro has been pushing. The nexus approach that both Ingrid, Athena, we are all pushing from the WCC. Marcella reminded us about appropriating our language, our struggle, and looking for alternate. I mean, we also not just question the system, but provide alternatives. Maud encourages us on the blue communities as a solution, and you challenged us on the post-growth era and redefining progress. These are some of the key words that we're taking away from this. Thank you very much, one and all, for this beautiful discussion, and we'll share the edited video soon with all of you. Thank you so much.